This episode of the Flush Podcast is brought to you by North Dakota Tourism, Federal Premium Ammunition, Onyx Hunt, Chief Upland, and by Huron, South Dakota. Today's show takes us to one of the most beautiful states that I've ever followed a bird dog while carrying a shotgun. We're off to Idaho, talking with Andrew Wayment, author of the book Idaho Ruffed Grouse Hunting, The Heartbeat of the Woods. We'll dig into upland bird hunting in the West.
The Flush. So fast, it hardly seems real. So vivid, the moment freezes in time before erupting in a blur of spurs and feathers. It's why we changed the way upland loads are built with Prairie Storm. Exclusive flight control FlexWad technology and a mix of copper-plated lead and flight stopper pellets combine to create dense, deadly shot strings through any choke. Longer shots, more power, fewer missed birds. Only from Federal.
If you're looking for a great bird hunting destination this season, then I strongly recommend that you consider one of my favorite places to hunt, North Dakota. North Dakota is a bird hunter's paradise. You can hunt both waterfowl and upland birds all in the same day. Ducks in the morning, pheasants, sharp-tailed grouse, and Hungarian partridge in the afternoon, or vice versa. North Dakota has a population estimate of 2.9 million breeding ducks, which is 19% above the long-term average. And their prairie pothole region is smack dab in the middle of the Central Flyway. Last season, pheasants, sharp-tailed grouse, and Hungarian partridge numbers rose in North Dakota, and there are reports coming out that some areas of the state have even higher numbers this season. I've been talking about the bird numbers in North Dakota for months now, and there's a chance that this could be one of the best hunting seasons we've seen in decades. North Dakota has approximately 800,000 acres of private land open to public walk-in hunting. For the latest plots guide, visit the North Dakota Game and Fish Department. Bag your limit this fall in North Dakota. Visit legendarynd.com to start planning your hunting adventure today. Welcome to another episode of the Flush Podcast. I'm Travis Frank. I'm your host. Brandon Morton, as always, produces this program. A big thank you to Brandon for all of your hard work, keeping me on track. Last week, we said goodbye to Scott's Labrador Retriever, Hank. Hank passed away at the age of 5 from cancer. It was a tough program for Scott. It's just been a heavy few weeks here at the office for all of us. But last week on the show, we also launched a new segment for this podcast that we're going to pay tribute to bird dogs that we've loved and lost. We'll name that segment later in the show and share our first listener story. But we're going to jump right in with our guest today. Andrew Wayment comes to us all the way from Idaho. Andrew, thanks for taking the time today to jump on the call.
I really appreciate you having me, so thank you. This is a great opportunity.
Where are you at in Idaho?
I'm in Idaho Falls, which is southeastern Idaho, not too far from Yellowstone. So it's the biggest city in eastern Idaho.
Gotcha. How long have you lived there?
Lived here for about 18 years. My oldest son is getting ready to turn 18, and we moved here when he was a baby. So.
Gotcha. Are you originally from Idaho then?
I've lived quite a few different places. My parents moved here to Rupert, Idaho back in, I think, 1992. So I've called Idaho home since that time.
Gotcha. Have you been a bird hunter your whole life?
I've been around hunting. I've been an outdoorsman my whole life. I didn't come to bird hunting until a little bit later in my life. Actually, when I started law school is when I really got into bird hunting. So that would have been 1998.
What drew you to it?
I have a brother that you've probably heard of, Sean Wayment. He's a veterinarian and also a blogger and a big time bird hunter. He's the one that really got me into bird hunting back in law school. And before that, we had a Springer Spaniel when we were kids, and he was old enough at that time to take advantage of that. So he's the one that really got me into bird hunting, introduced me to bird dogs, and has been kind of a mentor to me this whole time.
In the Midwest, when a lot of people look back at their first upland bird hunt, a lot of times, not always, but I would say that a high percentage of the time, people say it was a pheasant that drew them in. What was your first upland bird that you shot?
That's a great question, and I have to answer the same as everybody else. It was a pheasant. We were up in Moscow, Idaho. When I was in law school, my brother Sean invited me to go hunt with his pointer jibs, and we went to this WMA, and she locked up on point, and I had this dumpy old pump 12, and I hit that bird, and after that, seeing that point, hitting that bird, I was an addict from that point forward. So that was the beginning of it.
Gotcha. So where, of all the bird species you have access to in Idaho, out there in the West, where do pheasants rank for you in your list of, if you have anything you could hunt for on a given Saturday, what are you going to go for? And where do pheasants rank on that list now?
Idaho has a bunch of different species. Mm-hmm. So I think if I went over them, and I won't do that for your listeners, but I think there's 9 upland game species. And I would probably put pheasants dead last. And the reason being is that I always joke that pheasants in Idaho are an endangered species, but it's just not like it used to. My dad used to tell us stories when he was a kid. He lived in North Utah. Mm-hmm. They would come up to Idaho, and you'd hear stories of limiting out in 30 minutes.
Yeah,
and there's nowhere that I'm aware of in Idaho that has that type of hunting. There are some pretty decent areas, but it's all private property. And so it's hard to access good pheasant hunting in Idaho. I'm sure that there are people that would contradict me on that, but for me, it's just a lack of access and a lack of habitat as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are definitely spots. I've had a lot of viewers reach out over the last 5-6 years, sending me invites to come out to their place in Idaho and pheasant hunt. And they say they've got, X amount of birds on their land. And I don't, I believe them, but I've heard more people say that generally, pheasants aren't nearly what they once were out there. What is the biggest change that has caused that?
I think it has a lot to do with how farmers farm. Mm-hmm. They used to use the fence or leave the fence rows. They used to not plow up to the road, but this clean farming has had a lot to do with it. So I would say that's probably the number one factor. We also have a lot of predators, avian predators, I think take a toll on pheasant populations. There's a little plot that's down by my mom's house in Rupert that we used to find birds at, but you go down, I walk by there with my dog all the time when I'm down there, and you'll see 10 raptors just sitting on any telephone pole right around there looking for any bird that they can find. So I think that takes a heavy toll as well.
So you said pheasants are dead last out of 9. What's number 1?
Oh, that's easy. Ruffed grouse. I love them. And I wouldn't have said that back when I started, but I just have grown to love ruffed grouse. I always tell people I'm a grouse hunter. I love any type of grouse. Mm-hmm. But if I had to choose just one, I would pick ruffed grouse. And then second, I would probably pick blue grouse because they overlap and I love them. And then sharp tail. And then I'd say sage grouse. And then I'd say spruce grouse, which we do have some. They're not as accessible to me as other species.
So it goes ruffed grouse, blue grouse, sharptail, sage, spruce, and then do you throw quail next, or what comes?
I'd say quail, huns are probably equal to me.
Okay.
We do love to hunt them, and we spend a lot of time in October hunting quail and huns. But if I had my pick, I'd pick grouse every time.
So do your ruffed grouse and blues, when you go into the woods, your dog goes on point, it could be one or the other, or do you have specific areas that you find one versus the other?
It depends on the time of the year. Blue grouse are reverse migrators, so they will move up in elevation as the season progresses.
Hmm.
But in September, in most of my coverts, you can find both blues and roughs. So there is an overlap just that time in the season.
Yep.
So it just depends on where you're hunting. There are some areas where I find mostly ruffed grouse, and that's down by the riparian areas.
Mm-hmm.
And blues are kind of I would say they're up on the ridge lines, sometimes above tree line. So it really depends on where you're hunting, but there are areas where they overlap, like, for example, logging roads.
Yep.
You'll find both species.
When you're hunting those birds, are you in the mountains mostly?
Yes. Yep. They're mountain birds. In Idaho, they call them forest grouse, but yes, they're up in the mountains.
Gotcha. What does a typical day look like for you when you're grouse hunting in the forest? In the Midwest here, North Woods, some people, if they hit their clicker and say they had 15 flushes, that's a banner day. What is it like for you in Idaho?
We've had days where we see more birds than that. It just depends on the year. I mean, we have our ups and downs, just like anywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say that, an average day we see 10 to, 20 birds. And we usually hunt, half day, especially in the early season, because it can get hot for the dogs.
Gotcha. So I see on Instagram, you post a lot of fishing photos to go along with your hunting photos. If you had to choose just one, would you be a fisherman or a hunter?
Oh, that's a tough one. To me, they're two sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
So I would hate to have to choose. I mean, when it's bird hunting season, that's all I want to do. I may stop and fish for 10 minutes, but I usually turn my focus to hunting, primarily or solely.
Mm-hmm.
But when fishing season comes around, I'm just as dedicated to it. So I love it just as much. I've written about fishing. I write about bird hunting. So to me, they're both equally, important.
How long have you been a writer?
I've started writing. Well, let's see. I wrote my fly fishing book starting, I think, in 2007.
Okay.
And it was published back in 2011. I started blogging right around 2009. So I've been blogging since that time. And my brother and I have the Upland Ways blog, which we used to have one before that called Upland Equations, but we kind of combined our efforts and blogs, and now it's just Upland Ways.
So what do you blog about?
Bird dogs, bird hunting in Idaho, bird hunting, quail, grouse, fishing. I have also got a blog about tenkara fishing, if you can believe that. I do a little bit of that as well on some of the smaller creeks that I fish.
Wow. What keeps you intrigued about writing? Why don't you you're a busy man, you've got a law practice. Why don't you just say, I'm going to go hunt for fun? Why do you make it a point to put your travels into words that people can read?
Well, that's a good question. I'm a lover of literature. One of the things that my brother and I both do is collect outdoor books. So I've got an extensive library of upland game hunting books as well as fly fishing books. So I think part of it has to do with my love of good literature on those sports. And I think it's just to leave a legacy, I guess. You want to share some of the things that you've experienced, some of that beauty, and I just think of the writers that I love, like Burton Spiller or George King. I'm so glad that they wrote the things that they wrote. And so, in my humble efforts, I guess I'm trying to live up to what they've done.
So if you love literature and you love the uplands, besides your own books, what is your favorite book that you've ever written or read?
Boy, that's a good question. I have quite a few that I really love, and so this is going to be repetitive to some of the other podcasts that I've done, but I love Burton Spiller. I think he's one of the best writers that we've had in that genre. And I would say that his Grouse Feathers is good, but Drummer in the Woods, I think, is his best work. And I would say that's the best book out there that's on bird hunting or on grouse hunting.
When did you write your grouse hunting book?
I actually have another book that's waiting to be published. Just haven't been able to find a good fit for it, so I may end up self-publishing it. So that I actually wrote that one first. That one's called Roadside Revelations. But I started writing Idaho Ruffed Grouse Hunting back in 2013, and it was published in 2018.
Wow. So it takes 5 years. Is that normal, or is that based on the fact that you're a father and you're a lawyer and you've got a lot of other things going at the time or in life?
Well, I'm sure that has a lot to do with it. Just to tell your listeners, I have 6 kids. The oldest is 24. The youngest is about 10. So I have a lot of kids, and I'm a practicing attorney. I think some of it had to do with just trying to find a good fit for it, a publisher that was willing to take a chance on it. And I did finally I got turned down quite a few times before I actually found a publisher to publish it.
Why do they turn you down? What is it about? They don't want to be in the hunting world, or is there something else to it?
Well, one of the publishers that I dealt with, and I won't mention any names, I think they're just too busy. They just had too much on their plate. They're pretty, I'd say, prominent in the upland world.
Okay.
And they were looking at it, they were interested in it, but they just never could get back with me with an answer. So that was the first one. The second one I sent to, the publisher actually told me, after reading the book, he asked me, you haven't really been hunting ruffed grouse very long, have you? So he didn't feel like I had the experience or the know-how to write about those things. And by the time he reviewed the manuscript, I think I had been hunting ruffed grouse for 17 years. So anyway, he had another writer read the manuscript, and I guess they just weren't impressed with it. So, I ended up with a company that doesn't do hunting books that actually printed it. It's the History Press out of South Carolina, of all places, to do it. They did a book on Idaho Ruffed Grouse Hunting.
Wow.
So, and I'm very pleased how it turned out. It's a beautiful book. It's well edited. It's got beautiful photography, tons of beautiful artwork. It turned out great.
So the title is called Idaho Ruffed Grouse Hunting, the Heartbeat of the Woods. Can you explain what the reader will learn about in this book and take us through the book itself?
You bet. So the book is basically stories and essays on grouse hunting with the focus on Idaho. So, and it kind of starts from my roots, which was hunting ruffed grouse in law school, and it goes up until the time that the book was published. And there's a lot of essays in there that kind of try to tap into the history of ruffed grouse hunting and the literature of it. So there's references in there to Burton Spiller, to George King, to Corey Ford, to George Bird Evans, a lot of the great writers out there. I would take thoughts or things that they had said and then kind of related that to my own experiences. So it's not a where to, how to book. It's more of a love story, I guess you could say. It's got the some of my experiences, but also some of the things that I've experienced hunting in ruffed grouse. So I basically was trying to show people that, hey, what you guys have out in the East that's so beautiful and great, we have it here too. So
what did you learn most about ruffed grouse while writing this?
I would say they're a challenging game bird. One of the things that if you read about grouse hunting in Idaho, is you're always going to hear that, they're fool hens, that they're not a worthy game bird. I think one of the writers from Montana is named Don Thomas, actually writes in his book Fool Hen Blues about how dumb ruffed grouse are compared to how they are back east. But one of the things that I would say about them is that they can be educated, and they become just as challenging as any game bird, maybe more so after you hunt them for a while. So, I've been hunting my coverts now for 15 to 20 years, and they're a challenge. So they become just as difficult as any other bird. And I would say that it's a great experience here in Idaho. And the other thing I'd tell people is that I usually don't run into people hunting grouse in Idaho. And it's a well underused resource. And a lot of Idaho hunters that I know and I hunt with have actually criticized me, saying, well, why would you tell people about how great the grouse hunting is in Idaho? And the truth is, I hardly see people. Mm-hmm. I hardly run into people out where I hunt.
Well, I think, as a bird hunter myself, and I travel around the country and hunt different birds in different places, I think the reason why you don't have a lot of people traveling to your area to hunt for grouse is because, let's say somebody from Minnesota or Michigan or Wisconsin, if they're going to travel out of state to go hunt, most likely they're going to go for something that they can't shoot at home or they can't hunt for at home. We've got grouse here, so I want to go for maybe chukar or some of your quail species or sage grouse or a bird that doesn't live in this part of the country. So if you do get out of state travelers, I guess is my opinion, but I would think most of them are going to go after some of the other species, which means you've got all these birds pretty much to yourself. And if the locals have a wide variety to choose from, you just don't have the population going after them. I mean, do you feel like that's accurate?
I would say, for Idahoans, most people are big game hunters.
Yeah.
So grouse are not even on their radar. If they shoot them, it's because they're in their, big game camps, and they'll, shoot them with their bow or, with the 22. And so a lot of the grouse that are killed in Idaho are killed by big game hunters just incidentally. Mm-hmm. But I'd say the outer staters, they come, like you said, to hunt chukar. They come to hunt quail, and there is some phenomenal quail hunting and chukar hunting in Idaho. But I would say that the rough grouse hunting is some of the best. I've had people that hunted with me that were from back east, one from Minnesota and one from Vermont, and I took them to some of my special coverts. And they would say, we never flushed or seen as many birds flushed as we saw today. So they were way impressed. Yeah.
So how do the blues compare to the rough grouse? So in my experience, hunting grouse here in the Midwest, in Canada, in the forests, they can be, the further from humans they are, the first time you interact with them, they can be pretty dumb, but they can also be extremely, extremely elusive and smart. But I hear people talk about the blues and they say how stupid they are. And I have to imagine, yes, maybe because you're not hunting them, but if you start hunting them, they all of a sudden can become a challenge as well. So are your blues, are they as dumb or as foolish as people claim they are when you're actually trying to hunt for them?
I would say that they're just like any other grouse. I mean, when you first encounter them in remote areas, they can be considered as fool hens. Mm-hmm. But whenever you get a dog in the mix, any of the birds that you hunt take on a weariness or a wariness, and they will flush hard. And so I tend to struggle with blues more than I do with rough grouse, and so they're more of a challenge to find, and they flush hard. So a lot of times, they will flush up into a tree and we try to catch them before they hit the branch. But most of the time they're barreling off a ridge downhill. And so it's really challenging shooting. I love blue grouse. I for a very long time, they were my very favorite game bird. And I think, if you look at what Don Thomas writes about him, Fool Hen Blues, he says the same thing about him. When he's up bow hunting, he'll take them with his bow. But once you get that dog in the mix, they're as challenging and as sporting as any game bird.
So of all the bird species, rough grouse are my favorite to eat. They're just delicious. How do blue grouse compare?
It depends on what they're eating. They're much, much bigger bird and a little bit darker meat.
Okay.
But if you're up on a ridge and you're hunting them in the pine trees, which, in October, they'll start migrating up and they're solely eating pine needles, they're not very good. I'll just put it that way. But they can be really good in the early season, and the younger birds tend to eat a little bit better. But I think most of the hunters that eat them, say that they're great. They're an excellent table fare.
How often do you hunt the same places in a season? Would you go back to the same area twice in a year, or do you just have so much land available that you don't go back to an area twice?
It depends on what I'm seeing in my coverts. If I see, a lot of birds, for example, if we get into a covey and there's 7 birds, I feel good about taking maybe 3 of those birds. So I won't over hunt an area, and I certainly try not to shoot out, a covey. But, sometimes it just depends on the year. And, like there's one particular ridge that I like to hunt that's not too far from home. And I'll hunt that maybe 2 or 3 times a year. And when you go there, sometimes you'll see 2 or 3 birds. Sometimes you'll see 15. So I think, as the bird, especially as blue grouse migrate, they're going to be there one day and they'll be gone the next. So it's just, I'll go back hoping to just hit it right, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't realize that you've got a migration going on there. It's something that most upland hunters don't, besides a sage grouse, really. Migrating is just not very common, at least in the Midwest. When it comes to ruffed grouse, we don't think about that at all. So in Idaho, I want to say it's like 3/4 of your state is public land. Is that accurate? Like 75%?
I think that's probably true. I'd have to look at the acreage, but I would say that that's probably pretty close.
Do you take that for granted, or does that keep you from wanting to even travel east ever to bird hunt?
I've had people that have invited me, and I probably will go this year to hunt, of all things, woodcock in South Carolina.
Okay.
I've had people invite me up to Michigan and to Minnesota, and I'd love to do it, but it's hard to leave when everything that I want to do is right here. My brother Sean comes out every October and we hunt for a week, and we hunt all over southern Idaho. So we'll hunt for multiple different species, and you've probably seen some of the pictures that we post during that time, but it's a lot of fun. So for us, for me I only get so much time off work as an attorney, and for me to give up that, I basically would have to give up that week in Idaho if I wanted to go somewhere else, if that makes sense.
Yep. And why would you leave paradise to go try to find something else when the season is so short the way it is? Yeah,
for sure. I totally agree.
So is your law practice a stressful job that, your walks in the forest and the mountains, it's a stress reliever? And, are dogs a stress reliever for you, or do they add stress to your life?
Well, I love that question, by the way. So thanks for asking it. Yes, being an attorney is a super high stress job, and there's a lot of negativity that goes with it. And I've written about this a lot, but for me, the outdoors, fly fishing, grouse hunting is a way to totally escape that and to just let my mind be at ease and be focused on the moment. I would say that my bird dog is, one of my best friends. I spend time, I take her fishing, even though she's not very conducive to good fishing conditions, but I love to spend time with her. And when I have time off, we'll, go hiking, or we'll go scouting for grouse. And, so we spend a ton of time together. And to me, it's always been a great break from the things that I do every day.
What's your dog breed of choice?
Good question. I am a Brittany fan, so I love American Brittany's and I love French Brittany's. If I had to pick just one, I probably would pick the French, and that's what I currently have. Rainey is a French Brittany. Before I had Rainey, I had Misty. She was American, and she was wonderful, just a wonderful dog. And then I also had I had 2 dogs at once, and Sunny was a French Brittany. So I just love that breed. Love the biddability. They're just smart dogs and very good companions.
Gotcha. How does your dog fish with you? Because I have trouble taking mine because when I bring a fish boat side, she wants to jump in. So I've netted her along with my fish before. Do you have any troubles with your dog wanting to get in on the action when you're trying to battle a fish?
Absolutely. My dog is always trying to retrieve my fish. Nice. And just the other day, like about a week and a half ago, we were up just fishing this little creek that I call Trickle Creek. And I hooked this fish, and Rainey tries to retrieve it, and the fish swims around and wraps around her legs. So I can't believe I even landed the fish after all. I think I posted a video on Instagram of that, but she can be quite annoying, but she sure loves it. And she gets as excited about catching fish as she does about going grouse hunting.
It makes it fun. Well, I want to get into your current conditions out there, drought, what you're seeing on the landscape. But first, do you have any more? You mentioned you have another book in the works. What is the name of that book, and what's it about?
Well, I actually have two, but I have one that's completed. And I think what I'll do is I'll probably just self-publish. Just like, I don't know if you know Randy Schultz, but he just self-published his second book, and his first one was really great, and it turned out beautiful. So I think he used Amazon publishing. So I probably will do that same thing. But that book is called Roadside Revelations, and it's just about bird dogs. And since I focused on grouse hunting in the first book, this one is more about the other species in Idaho. So it's, just stories and just original content. Some of it's been published in magazines, some of the articles that I've written in the past, but that's the one. And then I thought, that the follow up to Idaho Ruffed Grouse Hunting would be a book about, Idaho grouse hunting. And it'd be, about all of the different species because we have 5 different species of grouse that you can hunt here in Idaho. So, and that one's about halfway done. Really?
When do you anticipate getting that one finished?
Oh, probably. I want to say next year, but probably 5 years. So that's how long it took the first one, right?
Right. And double or triple the expectancy on that, because hunting season is coming up here shortly, so you got to take a little break from writing to actually get out and enjoy it. Yeah, for sure. Where do people buy your current books?
I think the best place to find it is obviously Amazon.com, but you can find it at Barnes and Noble. Idaho Ruffed Grouse Hunting, you can pretty much find in any bookstore. And here in Idaho Falls, you can pick it up at the grocery store, Albertsons, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, that's really cool. How do your kids feel about being able to read those stories, or do they have interest in it at all?
None of my kids have really taken up hunting. Some of them like to fish, but I think that it'll come with time. I mean, my son Thomas will go and he'll go hunting with me, but he hasn't been wanting to take up the gun yet. So he's almost 18. I hope that someday he'll want to do that. But right now, I have mostly girls, by the way. I should say that I have 4 daughters and 2 sons. The one's too young, Ben, and Thomas is 18. And I hope that someday he'll want to do that.
Gotcha. Well, I want to dig into the habitat conditions and the different bird species. But first, I have a quick message from our presenting sponsors. For generations, bird hunters have hit the fields carrying some form of a vest or game pouch on their backs. Sometimes the vests rip, tear, and fall apart. Other times, they're downright uncomfortable. That's why Chief Upland designed a vest that's durable, comfortable, and fits your needs. Their new Upland vest is fully customizable to fit the size and shape of all hunters. Plus, you can decide where you want to attach your shell pouches and accessories. Last fall, I tested a Chief Upland vest for the first time, and I love it. Birds can be front-loaded into the game pouch, and they fit nicely in the back without sagging. And that's a big deal because the weight disbursement on your back and shoulders won't tire you out, even if you're climbing up in the mountains or with a full pouch of birds. The vest itself is extremely lightweight, weighing only 2.56 pounds. The material is built out of Cordura fabric, which is the same waterproof fabric used in tactical military gear. You can confidently hunt with a cheap upland vest in some of the world's toughest environments. And they have pre-orders for a new line of vests that just came out. Check out Chief Upland. Push further and hunt longer with the game-changing vest from Chief Upland, built for your pursuit.
Hey, upland hunters. If you're looking for a place to chase roosters this fall, you need to check out Huron, South Dakota. Here's why. The access to public hunting land is awesome. They have plenty of pet-friendly hotels for the hardest-working member of your hunting group. In addition, Huron is hosting a couple great events this hunting season, the first weekend of November. The Ringneck Festival, a 6-man competitive hunt which draws hunters from all over the country, and the Bird Dog Challenge. It's the opportunity you and your dog have been waiting for, complete with food, prizes, camaraderie, and so much more. The South Dakota pheasant season opens October 16th, so plan your hunting trip to Huron, South Dakota today. Check out the website and learn more at HuronSD.com.
All right. Andy, do you go by Andy or is it Andrew?
Name is Andrew, but I do go by Andy. My friends call me Andy.
Your friends call you Andy, so I can call you Andy now, or not yet?
You bet.
All right. So what are the conditions looking like in Idaho right now? Are you guys experiencing the drought like everybody else?
We've been hit pretty hard, and I would say that especially the Chucker Hills, I think they're going to be super, super dry. They're one of the places that I went up to fish just a couple weeks ago, which is alpine. It was, there's cattle that are grazing and they've eaten everything down to the ground except for the sagebrush. Wow. So I think it's a super dry year, tons of fire hazard. It's pretty hazy outside right now just because of smoke. And I'm not sure if that's because of local fires or, fires from California, but we have, it's pretty severe drought, and some of the rivers that, are typically world class are so dangerously low that the Fish and Game or, the private landowners have kind of shut down access to them just to protect the fish.
Well, you've got 9 different species of upland birds out there. Which ones concern you the most because of the drought conditions?
Well, it seems like every time we have a drought like this, you'll see the Hungarian partridge numbers plummet. So I'm hopeful that we'll be able to find some birds this fall. Usually my brother Sean wants to hunt Hungarian partridge when he comes, so we spend a lot of time doing that. But I haven't really scouted for him yet. But I wouldn't be surprised if they got hit hard. I would also say that quail, they need rain, especially in the early season. In a good year, when it rains, sometimes they'll come up with multiple broods and you'll have a banner year. Well, this year, the places that we hunt, we lost some of our coverts, but in some of the places that we can still access, I think it's going to be a little tougher year for quail.
Dang it. Hungarian partridge are one of my all-time favorite birds. It's like a larger version of a quail. They handle well for dogs or just live in some of the most beautiful places. When you're going after Hungarian partridge in Idaho, where are you looking? What type of terrain are you looking for?
We like to hunt near some of the cultivated wheat fields, some of the what they call dry farms. You'll have areas that aren't plowed that are sagebrush, and if they're doing a different crop, for example, a safflower, I think is one, you won't find the birds. But if they've done wheat that year, you're always going to find wheat on the edges, and it seems like you always find the Hungarian partridge as well. So that's the areas that we would focus on, is on the edge of these cultivated fields. So.
Gotcha. When I hunted out there, I was surprised at how far away from ag land we were and how many Hungarian partridge we found. I mean, I couldn't see ag land in any direction, and we were flushing covey after covey of Hungarian partridge, and we were at about 5,000 feet elevation, 5 or 6, I want to say, right in essentially chucker habitat. Is that common to find them up in the mountains on rim rock and places that the chucker live?
Well, I call them birds of the void because I think they filled a niche that, other birds have kind of moved out. So you can, I've seen them up on top of ridges, when we're out turkey hunting and you're hearing, ruffed grouse drum around you. Mm-hmm. So they'll occupy any habitat that, has the things that they need. And, I've seen them out in the desert where there's no cultivated fields for miles. So there's a lot of Idaho has, I would say, when a good year, Idaho probably has more Hungarian partridge than anything. It just depends on the year, because they'll fill habitat areas that are not occupied by any other game bird.
Yeah, I distinctly remember hunting out there because of the beauty. Idaho was just spectacular. Everywhere we went down by the Snake River, we went up into the mountain areas, and everywhere we went, I felt like I was walking and hunting in a postcard. It was just spectacular. And I remember leaving thinking, how is it that I did not see another bird hunter in 3 days of hunting up and down? And we saw big game hunters drive by glassing for mule deer, and we saw, oh my goodness, we jumped a lot of mule deer too. But just, it stood out to me how spectacular Idaho is for just the views and then the variety of birds. I mean, at one time, our dogs flushed a covey of Hungarian partridge, and this was up on about. Then they flushed sage grouse, sharp-tailed grouse took off, and we shot chukar all within the same half-hour walk in the same flat on top of a mountain. And you can't find that in a lot of places in this world, but you guys have it out there. It's one of the most spectacular places to hunt, but probably underrated. Maybe it's the distance that people have to travel to get to you, but let's. And now I'm just thinking in my mind out loud here. So that's more just my observation of Idaho, but we'll get back to the birds. When it comes to the quail, where do you typically, where would you, maybe let's pick a region of Idaho. Do you have one that stands out to you as this is kind of a destination to go for quail?
Southwestern Idaho has some of the best quail hunting I've ever experienced. And a lot of it's on private property. So one of the places that we used to hunt, it was not uncommon to see, 200 to 500 birds hunting a creek bottom. So there's some phenomenal quail hunting in southwestern Idaho. I would say a second to that would be up where I went to law school. There are some really good quail numbers up in the Palouse Prairie area.
Okay.
Again, you're dealing with a lot of private property though, so it can be a little more challenging to get access. And I would say that about a lot of bird hunting in Idaho is just being able to figure out where, places that are accessible to hunt.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, you've got millions of acres of public land. What's the most accessible bird that you can hunt on the public grounds?
Boy, I would say forest grouse.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh. Unreal. When does your sage grouse season open?
Our sage grouse season is super short. We've had a lot of our habitat that's burned because of fire, lightning fires. Mm-hmm. And so it's only like a 2-day hunt now. So I think it starts on a Friday and ends on the Saturday. And I believe I want to say it's September 18th, same day, or right around that September 18th day that quail and Hungarian partridge open.
Gotcha. Do you think there's a time coming up where there's not going to be a sage grouse season in Idaho?
It's very possible. We've just have habitat declines, and a lot of that has to do with cheatgrass when it comes in and replaces the native forbs. It's very flammable and it regularly burns. And so a lot of the areas that we hunt, like over by, Glens Ferry or Mountain Home, that area used to all be sagebrush. Now it's all cheatgrass. It's the sage has been burned off.
Dang. Well, let's make somebody an excellent do-it-yourself Idaho hunter. If they have 3 days to come out, let's say they're traveling from, I don't know, Illinois, and they've got 3 or 4 or 5 days to hunt, where should they go and what should they hunt for?
Boy, that's a good question. Like I've told you, I think you could pretty much pick any alpine area, that has some water, and you could probably find blues and rough grouse. So I would think, that would be a good opportunity for them to see birds. There are places to find huns and chukar and quail, but it's not like you're going to go just anywhere. You got to do your research. So, I would probably call, Fish and Game. I would probably talk to some of the biologists, see where they're seeing birds. I would, definitely look at some of the WMAs. Idaho does have some WMAs that have quail and huns. So, I would probably, most people when they come, like you said, they want to hunt quail and they want to hunt chukars and they want to hunt huns. And I would probably focus on probably south central Idaho, southwest Idaho, over in the Palouse Prairie, which is just a cornucopia of lots of different game birds.
Yeah. So is that South Idaho would be Twin Falls area?
Twin Falls has some good populations. I'm not sure how it's going to be this year though, just because of the drought.
I think you mentioned this, but you're not feeling confident about the chukar hunting this season because of your conditions. Is that accurate?
I'm not much of a chukar hunter, so I don't do a lot of chukar hunting. I usually only go like once or twice a year. Okay. So, but I think it's super, super dry, and I would be surprised if the chukars are thriving in these conditions.
Dang. Where are you guys at in your cycle for rough grouse? You mentioned that you do experience that population cycle out west. Are you on the upswing, downswing? Whereabouts in the cycle are you?
Well, that's a good question. Last year was probably my best year ever for rough grouse hunting, and I found birds almost every place that I hunted. But I was hunting the coverts that I know very well, and I know where the birds are. But I was eating lunch with a friend who is also a bird hunter just the other day, about 2 weeks ago, and he said to me, Andy, you're the only one that was finding birds last year. Everybody else that I talked to struggle in finding rough grouse. So I think we're probably on the downward swing, and I wouldn't say that we have the cycles quite like what you have in the Midwest or in the East. Yeah, but a lot of it has to do with, rain and drought and all of that. So with these drier years, I think, this may be a tougher year based upon what I'm seeing. Rainey and I have been out scouting, and we just haven't bumped into the birds like we typically would already by this time of the year.
Are you seeing broods out there when you're walking around, or is it singles?
We are seeing so far what we bumped into are just singles.
Dang.
Yeah.
That's not positive at all. Well, what are you most looking forward to this hunting season?
Oh, that's a good question. Last year we got out and did some things a little different because of Idaho's short sage grouse season. We actually went to Wyoming and had an absolute blast. So we probably will do that again, but I always look forward to having my brother come out. So he's coming out because it's such a dry year. He's coming out a little bit later in October, and it's supposed to be hot all the way up through October. So hopefully by then it cools down and we get a little bit of moisture and hopefully we can find some birds.
Mm-hmm. Do you, there anything that you tell people avoid this or watch out for this if you're coming out this direction? I know, last year we ran into snakes on a hunt, rattlesnakes. Do you have anything that you try to avoid that you would recommend for people to just be mindful of?
I laugh because I'd say just stay away from chucker hunting.
Why is that?
I just chucker hunting is my nemesis. It's just not my favorite thing to do. But I just say that jokingly. I do it. I'm just not that great at it. I always tell people I'm the world's worst chucker hunter. But I just wrote an article, by the way, in Gundog that just talks about some of the dangers that dogs face, desert dangers, that I've experienced, and, cactus and just overheating, things of that nature. So, I think Idaho is actually a pretty good, safe place for your dogs. I mean, obviously when you're hunting chuckers, you got to be aware of the dog, and you got to be aware of their feet, because it will shred a dog's pads pretty badly. So I would say if you're going to do that, just make sure that you've got the equipment to, take good care of your dog. But as far as snakes go, once October comes around, you hardly even run into any snake. And knock on wood, I've never ran into a rattlesnake while out bird hunting in Idaho. I would say you're probably more likely to run into a porcupine than you are a rattlesnake.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of porcupines in my travels, but
I believe it.
They don't concern me nearly as much. I've not felt like I needed to alter a hunt because of the chance that we might run into a porcupine. Whereas snakes, I don't know, they've left a pretty sour taste in my mouth. Well, Andrew, I really appreciate you taking the time today. Again, if somebody wants to read your blog or your books, where is the best place for them to go?
Well, Upland Ways is www.uplandways.com. My book is available on Amazon. It's on Barnes and Noble. It's had a lot of positive reviews. So if you want to learn more about it or see what other people have said about it, probably the best place is to go look at Amazon, because there are quite a few reviews of the book.
Gotcha. Well, I appreciate all of that information. I'm going to keep you on here if you don't mind. Last week we had Scott Franzen, who's the owner of our company and also one of the hosts of our television show, The Flush, and he lost his 5-year-old lab, Hank, to cancer. And we thought, let's start a new something on this show, a tribute to dogs that we've loved and lost. And we said, well, let's ask our listeners and our viewers if they can help us name this segment, and then if they'd be willing to share stories of some of their dogs. So we did have quite a few stories come in and titles, but I think we're going to go with a title sent to us by Randy Krebs, and it's called Retrieving Memories. So I think we'll title this segment Retrieving Memories. And today's story, the first retrieving memory that we're going to share, is from Grant Peterson. And it goes like this. There's something about leaving your home state and exploring a new area that intrigues me. Add a bird dog to that mix, and it becomes an addiction. This trip was a little more special than the others. It was my dog's first hunting trip. At 14 months old, Dixie was about to experience her first South Dakota fields. Getting her on wild birds and wild places was beyond exciting to me. After a couple days into the trip, we hunted a public land slough just past an old brown church, which had cattails surrounded by prairie grass. We broke open the box of Federals and loaded up. A couple of us walked the cattails while myself and the others flanked left and right in the tall prairie grass. Dixie was busy working the cattails while I continued to watch her closely, waiting for her tail to become a helicopter and the classic butt wiggle to go into full motion. When this happens, you better be ready. As we neared the end of the field, the much-anticipated flush happened. A rooster took off from the thick cattails right into the line of fire. Dixie was already in fast pursuit as the rooster started dropping back down. All we could see were cattails swaying back and forth as Dixie maneuvered through them, determined to find the fallen rooster. Seconds felt like hours as we impatiently watched on. Not long after, she crashed out of the cattails with the bird in her mouth, heading my way like an old seasoned veteran. It almost seemed as if time slowed down for a second as I watched her bring the bird to me. This is the moment I waited for all year. her first wild bird retrieve. My story is very similar to Scott's. My chocolate lab, Dixie, passed away this April at just 4 years old. She had 5 seizures within a 24-hour period, which led to brain swelling. We later found out she had a brain tumor. She was completely happy and healthy leading into this day, so it threw us all by complete surprise. Thanks for coming up with this idea. I'm looking forward to future podcast episodes and stories. Grant Peterson. Grant, we appreciate you sharing the story about Dixie. It sounds like she was just a wonderful, wonderful bird dog. Andrew, do you have any stories about a favorite story about any of your dogs?
Oh, I mean, I have a million of them. I've had bird dogs now for, almost over 20 years. So they're definitely a big part of my life. But, what I probably would share, the story about Sunny Girl. She was my first French Brittany. And, people don't typically think of Brittany's as good retrievers, but this dog loved to retrieve more than anything. So we used to hunt this creek bottom that was loaded with quail. We called it the trail to quail because there was just so many birds. And it seems like we would always find them in these thickets that were down in the bottom. And when a dog would go on point, you'd get these birds that would flush, and then they would go down the creek bottom, and then they, if you hit them, they'd drop into these big clusters. And I just remember that we had Sunny Girl with us. We had probably had 5 or 6 dogs on the ground, just running everywhere, pointing everywhere. But every time we drop a bird into one of those thickets, these young dogs wouldn't know what to do. And we would get Sunny Girl, and we would get her to go in there. And it seems like she was always the one to come up with the retrieve, a difficult retrieve in these thickets. And one time, this is a different creek bottom, but it's kind of the same scenario. I got into, I call the covert the miracle half mile because it's the whole area around it had burned. And there was just this 1/2 mile stretch of this creek bottom that was still thick with cover. And we just got into the birds so heavily that it was like, boom, boom, boom. We're just dropping birds right and left. And I shot this one bird, and it dropped down into this creek, this little, into this deep hole in the creek. And so I had all these dogs that are standing around the edge looking down, and it's about a 5-foot drop to get to the water. Mm-hmm. And next thing you know, I see Sunny Girl, and she's swimming up the creek to get that bird. And I'll just when I talk about her, I say, there's that dog loved to retrieve more than any dog I've ever seen. She loved me about as much as she loved to retrieve. So I just really loved that dog. She was such a good dog. And that's why I have Rainey today. It's kind of a tribute to her, and the relationship that we have. And it's just so wonderful to be able to experience that again.
Awesome. Dogs are so special. And that's what makes upland hunting so much fun, is you get to share it with, a dog like that and hold on to those memories. Well, Andrew, I appreciate you taking the time today to teach us a little bit about Idaho and to share your passion with everybody and your stories. Once again, thank you to our sponsors, Federal Premium Ammunition, Onyx Hunt, North Dakota Tourism, Chief Upland, and Huron, South Dakota, for helping us to make this show possible. If you need a bird hunting fix to get you excited for the upcoming season, the Flush television show is airing now each week on the Outdoor Channel. You can watch the shows Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays, and Saturdays. All the times are posted on our website at theflush.tv. If you want to learn more, you can DVR those episodes and watch them anytime. And you can go back and watch the last 6 seasons of our television show on our YouTube channel and on Amazon TV. So if you can't find us, I'm sorry. We're out there. We are out there. If you have any questions or guest ideas for this show, I'm getting a lot of them. I love all of them. Please keep them coming. You can reach us on Facebook and Instagram. Just search for The Flush TV and you'll find us. Or you can just send me a message. You can find me on Instagram at Travis Frank. Same with the Facebook. Thank you for joining us today. We'll be back next week with another episode of The Flush Podcast. I'm Travis Frank, reminding you to take the time to introduce someone new to the field.